Early this week, British bases in Cyprus were attacked. Although the base was only partially damaged and no life was lost, the Cypriot government spoke out against the actions of the British government, arguing that a perceived lack of clarity over the use of British bases had dragged the island into the conflict. In fact, a Cypriot government spokesperson even went further, and when they were asked about whether they will attempt to renegotiate the status of the British bases, replied, "In this context, we're not ruling anything out." So, with this in mind, let's have a look at why Britain has bases in Cyprus in the first place, exactly what's happened in the last few days, and whether Cyprus could, realistically, negotiate the end of the British presence on the island. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has had a rough old time of it. On the international front though, he's had success, and even managed to stand out among Western allies as the leader that appeared closest to Trump. However, this closeness doesn't appear to have provided Starmer with many benefits, and has only served to humiliate him further. In the latest edition of our magazine, we discussed the failure of this so-called Trump appeasement strategy, and why it's only served to worsen Starmer's authority. That's just one of 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to too long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. Now, Britain has two bases on Cyprus, Akrotiri in the southwest and Declassified in the southeast. Officially, these bases together form the British overseas territory of the Sovereign Base Area of Akrotiri and Declassified, sometimes shortened to SBA, which makes them Sovereign British Territory. Unsurprisingly, this arrangement is the result of agreements made by colonial powers in the 19th century, the most significant of which, in this case, was the Cyprus Convention of 1878. This was a secret deal between Britain and the Ottoman Empire, in which the former was handed administrative control of Cyprus in exchange for protecting the Ottomans' interests against the Russian Empire. Initially, Cyprus was administered as a British protectorate, and then, due to the outbreak of World War I in 1914, as a military occupation, and then, from 1925, as a crown colony. From the late 1940s, campaigns for enosis, a union between Greece and Cyprus, picked up, owing to the fact that a vast majority of the island was, and still is, Greek Cypriot. In the 1950s, this became an armed campaign, and in 1960, Cyprus gained independence from the UK. However, as part of the independence agreement, the United Kingdom retained possession of the sovereign base areas of Akrotiri and Declassified, which together comprise around 3% of the landmass of Cyprus, or around 98 square miles, and a number of retained sites. Areas around Cyprus that, while not in the SBAs, were needed for military equipment. The importance of these bases for the British derives from Cyprus's location in the eastern Mediterranean, with Britain being able to use the bases as a launching pad for intervention in the Middle East. This was especially important in the mid-20th century, when Britain wanted to defend their interests in the Suez Canal. In the decades that followed, and as British and American military cooperation deepened, Britain allowed the US access to its Cypriot bases. In the 1970s, for instance, the United States built an over-the-horizon radar called Cobra Shoe, which could observe Soviet activities in southern Russia. Fast forward to today, and the UK has two resident infantry battalions stationed on Cyprus, one at Akrotiri and one in Declassified. Currently the 1st and 2nd Battalion at the Royal Yorkshire Regiment, which are supported by personnel from the Royal Logistical Corps, Royal Army Medical Corps, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, Royal Military Police, and others. In addition to these, though, there's also a strong US military presence too, although the exact nature of this presence isn't publicly known. According to a Declassified UK investigation in 2023, this US military presence is significant. It includes 129 airmen and a permanent US spy force, the 1st Expeditionary Reconnaissance Squadron. Additionally, they claim that the US is building a $27 million, 147-room building to house its personnel in Cyprus, expected to be spread across 1.5 acres. The presence of the Americans on the bases has attracted significant scrutiny in recent years, especially as it's been claimed that they've passed intelligence gathered from these bases to the Israelis, who, again according to Declassified, may implicate the UK and US in potential Israeli war crimes. So that's a brief history of Britain and the US's military presence on the island. But what's happened in the last few days? Well, on the 1st of March, the RAF base in Akrotiri was hit by a drone, which resulted in a partial evacuation from the base. No one was killed or injured, and the strike caused only minor damage to an aircraft hangar. A day later, on the 2nd of March, 2 further drones headed for Akrotiri were intercepted. Senior members of the Cypriot government have stated that they believe the attacks were carried out by an Iranian Shahed drone, most likely fired by Hezbollah, an Iran-backed militant group from Lebanon, although this isn't confirmed. This theory, though, is bolstered by the fact that, following the attacks, Major General Ebrahim Jabari, a senior commander in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, told Iranian state TV that the Americans have transferred the majority of their aircraft to Cyprus. We will launch so many missiles towards Cyprus that the Americans will be forced to leave. Now, technically, while Starmer did say on Sunday that the US could use British bases for defensive strikes on Iranian missile facilities, so far no US bombers have used Cyprus as a launch pad for any such attacks. And Starmer said he believed that the strikes were not in response to any action taken by the British government. Nonetheless, the UK is now deploying HMS Dragon, one of the Royal Navy's 6 Type 45 destroyers with a range of advanced anti-air capabilities, just off the coast of Cyprus. And France and Greece have also set out to bolster the island's defence capabilities. However, with the British ship not expected to sail to Cyprus until next week, the UK's response has been criticised as sluggish. The Cypriot High Commander to the UK said, "The people are disappointed, the people are scared, the people could expect more." Cyprus is not a member of NATO, and has served as a humanitarian hub in previous crises. Understandably then, the Cypriot government is unhappy with the situation, with a spokesperson stating that there was no clear clarification that the British bases in Cyprus would under no circumstances be used for any purpose other than humanitarian reasons, and that the government will take all necessary steps to communicate our dissatisfaction. When asked whether the Cypriot government would seek to renegotiate the terms of the bases, the spokesperson replied, "We're not ruling anything out." So, with this in mind, could this actually happen? Well, it's hard to see how it really could. As we explained earlier, Britain doesn't lease the bases from Cyprus. Their authority derives from a mutual agreement made in 1960. The only real way for Britain to be made to leave is via an agreement with the British government. But given the geopolitical significance of the bases, it's hard to see a scenario in which the British government would agree to this, at least not in the near future. As we mentioned earlier, the latest edition of our magazine Too Long is out very soon. And if you subscribe using code SPRING26, then you'll get your first copy for as little as £4.99, as well as 20% off every future issue as long as you stay subscribed. As you can see, the latest issue's cover is the Disunited Kingdom, where we explore the different dividing lines in Britain today, from the growing political divides to the fracturing of the Union, the North-South divide, the gap between young and old, and many more. It's not all bleak though. We also discuss what unites us and how Britain could be fixed. Across 72 pages, this issue of Too Long features a whole lot more than just that. We also have our full ranking of the world's most influential people, including profiles of some of the highest ranking people, including Donald Trump, Xi Jinping, Zoran Mamdani, the Pope, Mark Carney, and even Jeffrey Epstein. There's also the fragmentation emerging within the EU, an examination of social media bans around the world, how religion is being hijacked by politicians, as well as much, much more. You can pre-order your copy at toolong.news and remember to use code SPRING26 for the best ever price.